I woke up in a hospital bed with one eye swollen shut, three broken ribs, and a decision that would either save my life or end it. The doctor stood at the foot of my bed, looking between me and my husband who was holding my hand so gently, playing the concerned spouse perfectly, the same hands that had beaten me unconscious 2 hours earlier. "Ma'am," the doctor said, his eyes locked on mine. "These injuries show a clear pattern of ongoing abuse. My name is Emma, and I'm 34 years old. I never imagined I'd be the kind of person telling this story. But here I am, 2.5 years after everything changed. I work as a librarian now in Portland, and most days I feel like myself again. But the journey to get here, that's what I need to share with you. Looking back, I can see how carefully constructed the illusion was. I met David at a charity fundraiser in the autumn of 2018. He was magnetic, the kind of person who commanded attention simply by walking into a room. He worked in finance, wore tailored suits, and had this disarming smile that made you feel like you were the only person who mattered. Our courtship felt like something out of a romance novel. He remembered that I loved jasmine tea and surprised me with a rare blend from a specialty shop. He listened when I talked about my dreams of opening a community reading program. He seemed genuinely interested in everything about me, my childhood, my fears, my aspirations. When he proposed after 18 months, I didn't hesitate to say yes. The wedding was in the spring, surrounded by cherry blossoms and the people we loved. My father gave a touching speech about how he'd finally found someone worthy of his daughter. My best friend Melissa cried happy tears. David's vows spoke of partnership, respect, and unwavering support. I believed every word. The first 6 months of marriage were everything I'd hoped for. We settled into our new apartment, a beautiful 2-bedroom with large windows overlooking the city. David seemed attentive and loving. We'd cook dinner together on weekends, explore new hiking trails, plan our future. I remember thinking I was the luckiest woman alive. But then, imperceptibly at first, things began to shift. It started with comments, small criticisms that seemed almost helpful. "That dress makes you look heavier than you are. Maybe try something more flattering?" Or, "Did you really think that story was interesting? You kind of rambled." I'd laugh it off, tell myself. He was just being honest. That honesty was good in a marriage. The criticisms became more frequent. My cooking wasn't quite right. My conversation at his work events was embarrassing. The way I organized the house was inefficient. I found myself second-guessing everything, trying harder to meet his standards that seemed to shift constantly. Then came the first incident. We'd been married for 8 months. I'd spent the afternoon with Melissa, catching up over coffee. I'd lost track of time and came home an hour later than I'd mentioned. David was waiting at the door, his expression cold. "Where were you?" he demanded. "I was with Melissa, remember? I told you this morning. You said you'd be back by 4. It's after 5. I checked my phone, confused. I said around 4 or 5. His hand shot out so fast I didn't see it coming. The slap knocked me sideways, my cheek burning, my mind unable to process what had just happened. We stood in frozen silence for what felt like an eternity. Then he crumpled. Actual tears streamed down his face as he dropped to his knees, grabbing my hands. "Oh God, Emma, I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened. The stress at work, the pressure I just snapped. Please, please forgive me. This will never happen again." I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. This was David, the man who'd proposed under the stars, who'd promised to cherish me. People make mistakes, I told myself. He was under tremendous pressure at his job. I'd been inconsiderate with my timing. We could work through this. The next day, he brought me roses, 3 dozen of them. He took me to the restaurant where we'd had our first date. He held my hand across the table and told me I was his whole world. I covered the faint bruise on my cheek with makeup and smiled, convincing myself this was just a bump in the road, that our love was strong enough to overcome it. I was so wrong. The second incident came 3 weeks later. I'd forgotten to pick up his prescription from the pharmacy. Such a simple thing, but I'd had a hectic day at the library, and it had completely slipped my mind. When he discovered I hadn't done it, his face transformed. The man I married disappeared, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. He grabbed my wrist, twisting it until I cried out in pain. "You had one simple task," he hissed. "One thing I asked you to do, and you couldn't even manage that." He shoved me hard against the wall, knocking the wind from my lungs. My shoulder struck the doorframe, sending shooting pain down my arm. Then he walked away as if nothing had happened, leaving me crumpled on the floor, gasping and confused. That's when I realized this wasn't a one-time thing. This wasn't just stress or a bad day. This was a pattern, and I was trapped in it. If you're finding the story compelling, please hit that subscribe button and give us a thumbs up. Your support helps us share more important stories like this one. Now, let's continue with what happened next. The abuse became cyclical. He'd hurt me, then shower me with apologies and gifts. There would be a period of relative calm days, or sometimes a week, where he'd be the David I thought I'd married. Then something would trigger his rage, and the violence would return, each time escalating. He started controlling every aspect of my life. At first it was subtle. "Do you really need to go out with your friends so often?" I thought we could spend more time together. Then it became demands. "Cancel your plans with Melissa. I want you home." When I hesitated, his anger would flare, and I'd learned what happened when I made him angry. I stopped seeing my friends. It was easier than dealing with the aftermath. Melissa called less and less, hurt by my constant cancellations. My parents noticed my absence from family gatherings, but I made excuses, headaches, work obligations, anything to avoid explaining the truth. The isolation made everything worse. Without friends or family to ground me, David became my entire world. He controlled our finances, giving me a small allowance for groceries and demanding receipts for every purchase. He monitored my phone, checking my messages and call logs. He insisted I quit my job at the library, claiming his salary was sufficient and that my place was at home. Without my own income or connections to the outside world, I felt myself disappearing. The confident woman who'd walked down the aisle was gone, replaced by someone who flinched at sudden movements and walked on eggshells in her own home. The physical abuse intensified. What started as slaps became punches. He was careful, hitting me in places that wouldn't show my stomach, my ribs, my back. When the bruises were visible, he'd make sure I covered them. Long sleeves in summer, turtlenecks, sunglasses, layers of makeup. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself. I'd lost significant weight because anxiety had stolen my appetite. My eyes looked hollow, haunted. I moved through life like a ghost, going through the motions but not really living. There were nights when the pain was so intense, both physical and emotional, that I'd stand in the bathroom contemplating ways to escape permanently. But some stubborn spark of survival kept me going. Maybe it was the memory of who I used to be. Maybe it was the faint hope that somehow, someday, I might find a way out. I tried to leave once. It was after a particularly brutal night, when he'd beaten me so severely I could barely walk. The next morning, while he was at work, I packed a bag with whatever I could carry. I took the small amount of cash I'd managed to hide away. I went to a motel on the other side of the city. For about 4 hours, I felt something close to hope. I'd done it. I'd escaped. But David found me. I still don't know how. Maybe he'd tracked my phone. Maybe he'd checked my credit card. But he found me. He showed up at that motel room door. And when I opened it, the look on his face terrified me more than anything before. He dragged me back to the apartment. Once inside, he beat me worse than ever, screaming that I belonged to him, that I had no right to leave, that if I ever tried again, he'd kill me. I believed him completely. "You're nothing!" he screamed in my face. "No one wants you. Your friends have forgotten you exist. Your family doesn't even call anymore. I'm all you have." And I believed that too. I believed I was trapped forever, that this was my life now, that I'd made my choice and had to live with it. The next 2 years blurred together in a haze of fear and pain. Every single day brought some form of abuse. The house wasn't clean enough. Dinner wasn't prepared correctly. I'd looked at him wrong. I'd said something he didn't like. The reasons didn't matter, he always found one. He'd grab my hair and slam my head against walls. He'd choke me until I saw spots. He'd kick me when I was down. And the whole time, he'd tell me it was my fault, that I deserved it, that if I'd just be better, he wouldn't have to discipline me. I stopped hoping for escape. I stopped imagining a better life. I just survived, moment to moment, day to day, trying to anticipate his moods, trying to avoid triggering his anger, knowing that nothing I did would ever be enough. The night that changed everything started like so many others. It was a Tuesday in November, cold and rainy. David had a stressful day at work, at least that's what he claimed. I'd prepared his favorite meal, set the table carefully, made sure everything was perfect. It wasn't perfect enough. He took one bite, and his expression darkened. "This is overcooked," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "I followed the recipe exactly," I said, my heart already racing. "I can make something else. You can't do anything right." He stood up, and I knew what was coming. I tried to back away, but there was nowhere to go. He grabbed me by the throat, slamming me against the refrigerator. My head connected with the metal door, and stars exploded across my vision. His hand tightened around my throat, cutting off my air supply. "I work all day while you sit at home doing nothing," he snarled. "And you can't even cook a decent meal." He threw me to the floor and started kicking. My ribs, my back, my legs, each impact sent waves of agony through my body. I curled into a ball, trying to protect myself, begging him to stop. He didn't stop. He pulled me up by my hair and started punching my face. I felt my nose break, tasted blood flooding my mouth. One punch connected with my temple, and the world started spinning. His voice sounded distant, like I was underwater. Then everything went black. When I started to regain consciousness, I was moving. My body jostled as if I were in a vehicle. I tried to open my eyes, but one was swollen completely shut. Through the other, I could barely make out that I was in David's car, lying across the back seat. He was driving, muttering to himself, "Wake up. Please wake up. Don't die. Not now." I tried to speak, but my mouth wouldn't work. Everything hurt, a deep, overwhelming pain that made it hard to think. Then I heard him rehearsing a story. She fell. She slipped on the stairs and hit her head. I came home and found her. I'm just a concerned husband taking his wife to the hospital. Over and over he repeated it, perfecting the lie that would explain away my injuries. Through the fog of pain, I realized where we were going. The hospital. There would be other people there, doctors, nurses, witnesses, people who might see through his lies. This might be my only chance, but fear overwhelmed that hope. He was right there. He'd control what I said, who I talked to. And even if I did tell someone, what would happen when we left? He'd threatened to kill me if I ever exposed him. Would this be the time he made good on that threat? The emergency room was a blur of bright lights and urgent voices. I was placed on a gurney, wheeled through corridors. David played his role perfectly, the concerned husband, his voice thick with worry. Please help her. I came home and found her unconscious at the bottom of the stairs. There was blood everywhere. A doctor and nurse began examining me. David stayed close, holding my hand, stroking my hair gently. To anyone watching, he looked like a devoted husband. But I could see the warning in his eyes. Can you tell me what happened? The doctor asked. I opened my mouth, looked at David standing right there, and felt the words die in my throat. Before I could answer, David jumped in with his rehearsed story. She fell down the stairs. I wasn't home, but when I arrived, she was unconscious at the bottom. The doctor made notes, but the nurse, an older woman with gray hair and sharp eyes, kept looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Ma'am, can you tell us in your own words what you remember? The nurse asked gently. I looked at her, then at David, then back to her. I wanted to scream the truth, but terror held me silent. I don't remember, I whispered. I remember being at the top of the stairs, then nothing. David squeezed my hand hard. A warning. They ordered x-rays and scans. When they had to remove my shirt to examine me, I saw the nurse's expression change. My entire torso was covered in bruises, fresh purple ones from tonight, yellowing ones from last week, fading green ones from weeks before. A timeline of abuse written on my skin. The doctor and nurse exchanged a look. Something shifted in the room. These bruises appear to be in various stages of healing, the doctor said carefully. Some are quite old. David didn't hesitate. She's always been clumsy. She bruises easily, too, always bumping into things. But the medical staff weren't convinced. They told David he needed to wait outside while they took me for scans. He protested, but they were firm. Hospital policy. For the first time in years, I was in a room without him. As they wheeled me away from the emergency room, away from David, the nurse leaned close. Her name tag read, Patricia. Honey, Patricia said quietly, I've been a nurse for 28 years. Those bruises didn't come from falling downstairs. I know what abuse looks like. Tears streamed down my face. I couldn't hold them back anymore. It's okay, she continued. You're safe right now. He can't reach you here. But I need you to tell me the truth. Did your husband do this to you? I wanted to say yes. I wanted to tell her everything. But the fear was paralyzing. I can't, I choked out. You don't understand. If I say anything, he'll kill me. We won't let that happen, Patricia promised. We have security. We have resources. But you have to tell the truth. They took me for scans of my head, chest, and ribs. The whole time my mind raced. Should I tell them? Could I trust them? What would David do? When they brought me back, I was placed in a private room. David was there, of course, still playing the worried husband. But I could see the tension in his jaw, the calculation in his eyes. Then the doctor returned with my test results. His expression was serious, determined. Ma'am, he said, addressing me directly, your scans show a concussion, a broken nose, 3 fractured ribs, and evidence of older fractures that healed improperly. He paused, his eyes locked on mine. These injuries show a clear pattern of repeated trauma over an extended period. The bruising indicates multiple incidents over many weeks or months. These injuries are not consistent with a fall down the stairs. They're consistent with sustained domestic violence. I watched David's face. All the color drained away. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. For the first time since I'd known him, he had no response. I've contacted hospital security and social services, the doctor continued. I need to speak with you alone, without your husband present. Now wait, David started, his voice rising. Sir, I need you to leave this room immediately. This is not negotiable. She's my wife. You can't. Actually, I can. Security, please. Two security guards appeared in the doorway. David looked at me, rage burning in his eyes. But he was trapped. In front of all these witnesses, he couldn't do anything. Fine, he said through gritted teeth. But Emma, remember what I told you. I'll be waiting right outside. After they escorted him out, I completely broke down. Everything I'd held inside for years came pouring out in heaving sobs. Patricia held my hand, telling me I was safe. When I could finally breathe again, the doctor asked gently, Did your husband do this to you? Yes. That single word opened the floodgates. The whole story came tumbling out the escalation. The daily beatings, the control, the isolation, the threats, everything. They listened. They believed me. A domestic violence advocate arrived. Her name was Rachel, and she had warm brown eyes and a calm voice. She'd been where I was, she told me. Her ex-husband had put her in a hospital bed 15 years ago. She understood. Rachel explained my options. I didn't have to go home with him. I could file a police report. There were shelters, resources, people trained to help. But he's outside, I said, panic rising. He's waiting. He said if I ever told anyone. He won't get near you, Rachel assured me. Security knows the situation. The police are already on their way. A detective arrived, Detective Sarah Martinez, a woman with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and an air of quiet competence. She took my statement, photographed every injury, documented everything I could remember. We have enough to arrest him right now, she told me. Multiple counts of assault. Is that what you want? What did I want? For 3 years, I hadn't been allowed to want anything, and now someone was asking me. Yes, I said, my voice stronger than I'd heard it in years. I want him arrested. I want him to pay for what he did. They asked if I had anywhere safe to go. I hadn't spoken to my parents properly in over a year, because David had isolated me from them. Rachel offered to call them. They'll be so disappointed in me, I said through fresh tears. They won't, Rachel said gently. They'll just be relieved you're alive. When my mother answered, Rachel explained the situation. I heard my mother's scream of anguish through the phone. Within 40 minutes, both my parents burst into my room, tears streaming down their faces. My mother took my hand so carefully, like I might shatter. Why didn't you tell us? She sobbed. I was scared and ashamed. This is not your fault, my father said firmly. None of this is your fault. Later, Detective Martinez returned with news. David had been arrested in the parking lot. He'd tried to run, which added charges. They'd found his phone, and it was full of evidence threatening texts to me, messages to friends about keeping me in line, even photos he'd taken of my injuries. I was admitted overnight for observation. My parents stayed with me, my mother holding my hand through the night, while nightmares plagued what little sleep I got. But David didn't come back. He couldn't. He was in jail. The next morning, Rachel returned with information about a domestic violence shelter, a safe, confidential place where I could begin to heal. And for the first time in 3 years, I felt something I'd almost forgotten: hope. The weeks and months that followed were both harder and better than I could have imagined. The district attorney charged David with multiple counts of assault, domestic violence, and false imprisonment. The evidence was overwhelming. His bail was set high, and I lived in terror that he'd somehow post it and come looking for me. But he didn't make bail. His parents, horrified by what their son had done, refused to help him. His friends abandoned him. He sat in jail alone. I moved into the domestic violence shelter, a nondescript building in an undisclosed location. It was filled with other women who'd survived their own versions of hell. We didn't judge each other. We understood in ways no one else could. I started therapy with Dr. Nina Patel, who specialized in trauma. She helped me understand that what I'd endured wasn't just abuse, it was systematic torture designed to break me. "You survived," she told me in one of our early sessions. "Do you understand how strong that makes you?" But healing was brutal. The physical injuries mended, but the psychological damage ran deep. I had nightmares every night. Panic attacks hit me without warning. I flinched at sudden movements. I couldn't handle closed doors or having my back to an entrance. The other women at the shelter became my support system. We'd gather in the evenings, sharing our stories, crying together, encouraging each other. There was no shame there, no victim blaming, just solidarity and understanding. I reconnected with my family. They visited as often as allowed, though my mother cried every time she saw me. She kept apologizing for not seeing the signs, for not pushing harder. "You have nothing to apologize for," I told her. "He was good at hiding it. This wasn't your fault." The trial was scheduled for 6 months after his arrest. The prosecutor, Amanda Chen, prepared me for what to expect. "His lawyer will try to discredit you," she warned. "They'll try to make you seem unstable or vindictive." Are you ready for that? I wasn't sure I was, but I knew I had to do this not just for myself, but for every woman who'd suffered in silence. Those 6 months were agonizing. I was living in the shelter, attending therapy multiple times a week, working through layers of trauma while preparing to face my abuser in court. I filed for divorce immediately. David tried to contest it from jail, but the evidence was too strong. The divorce was granted within 10 weeks. Slowly, I started rebuilding my life. I got a part-time job at a bookstore, quiet, peaceful work surrounded by stories. I reconnected with Melissa and other old friends. The relationships that had been damaged by isolation were slowly repaired. The trial finally arrived. Walking into that courtroom with my parents, Rachel, Detective Martinez, and Dr. Patel by my side, I'd never felt more supported or more terrified. When they brought David in, wearing an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs, I felt like I couldn't breathe. He looked at me with that familiar mixture of rage and possession, like he still owned me. But then I looked around at all the people who'd helped me escape, and I realized something profound. He didn't have power over me anymore. I'd survived the worst he could do, and I was still here. The prosecution presented their case photographs, medical records, testimony from the hospital staff, evidence from his phone. When it was my turn to testify, walking to that witness stand felt like climbing a mountain. But I did it. I told my story, every horrible detail. I cried through most of it, but I kept going. During cross-examination, David's lawyer tried every tactic suggesting I was clumsy, implying I was lying for attention, questioning why I'd stayed so long. But I didn't back down. I answered truthfully, and I watched the jury's expressions shift from neutral to sympathetic to angry on my behalf. When David testified, he lied through his teeth, painting himself as the victim of a mentally unstable wife. But when the prosecution cross-examined him, he lost his temper, giving the jury a glimpse of the rage I'd lived with. After a week-long trial, the jury deliberated for 7 hours. Guilty on all counts. I watched fear flash across David's face, real, undeniable fear. He was finally facing consequences. At the sentencing hearing 2 weeks later, I gave a victim impact statement I'd carefully prepared with Dr. Patel's help. Your Honor, David Morrison stole 3 years of my life. He didn't just hurt me physically, he destroyed my sense of self, my ability to trust, my belief in my own worth. For 3 years, I lived in constant fear. But I survived. And I'm here to ensure he's held accountable. The judge sentenced him to 12 years in prison, with no parole eligibility for at least 8 years. As they led him away, he looked at me one final time. But this time, I didn't look away. I stared back, and I saw the moment he realized he'd truly lost. That was 2.5 years ago. Since then, I've continued healing. I moved to Portland, changed my name, started fresh. I returned to library work. Now I'm a children's librarian, helping kids discover the magic of reading. I volunteer at the shelter where I stayed, helping other survivors find their way out. I speak at community events about domestic violence, about warning signs, about how to help someone who might be trapped. I'm in a new relationship now with someone gentle and kind who would never dream of hurting me. Trust is still hard. Vulnerability terrifies me, but I'm learning. I still see Dr. Patel every other week. The trauma doesn't disappear. It's something I'll carry always. But I have tools now to manage it, cope with it, heal from it. David is still in prison. I receive notifications through victim services if anything changes with his case. He has at least 5 more years before parole eligibility. But even if he gets out eventually, I'm not afraid anymore. Not like I was. Because I know my worth now. I know my strength. I survived the worst I could imagine, and I came out the other side. If you're reading this and you're in a similar situation, please know you deserve better. You deserve safety, respect, love without fear. There are people who will help you, advocates, shelters, police officers, doctors, nurses, therapists, whole networks of people waiting to support you. Leaving is terrifying. Healing is painful, but it's worth it. To wake up without fear, to make your own choices, to reclaim your life that's worth everything. You are stronger than you know. You can survive this. You can heal. You can build a beautiful life on the other side of this nightmare. I'm living proof.